And then you can start whenever you'd like.
Welcome to the March 18th, 2024 meeting of the Library Commission. This is a hybrid meeting with commissioners, city staff, and members of the public participating in person at the Menlo Park Library in accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and the public participating remotely. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. We will proceed with the roll call. Commissioners present, please raise your hand. Commissioner Ada Chenreiki.
Here.
Commissioner Alan Cohen, not yet. Commissioner Michael Herrick.
Here.
Commissioner Carol Orton.
Here.
Commissioner David Pollock.
Present.
Commissioner Jennifer Wise.
Here.
And of course, myself, Vice Chair Singh, I am here. Staff present include Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhardt and Assistant Library and Community Services Director Nick Sejda. And LCS Supervisor Rose Waldman.
Hello.
Hello. Nick is also the staff liaison for the commission. Nick will be helping facilitate the meeting. Nick, will you please take a moment and provide instructions to the commission and members of the public in attendance on how this meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Vice Chair Singh. For members of the public who are attending this meeting virtually and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For those who are calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand when you wish to speak. Members of the public attending remotely who wish to speak, please take a moment to make sure that your first and last name are updated on Zoom, or you may provide your name and the spelling as you are called to speak. Public comment will be heard in the order received and is limited to 3 minutes in length. For members of the public attending in person, there are speaker cards available on the table over there. Please complete one and turn it in to me or another staff member before public comment is called for on the item you wish to speak on. If there are a large number of public commenters, the time limit may be adjusted by the chair of the meeting in order to allow everyone a chance to comment. When your turn for online public comment has arrived, I will unmute you. And with that, I'll return the meeting to Vice Chair Singh.
All right, thank you, Nick. Item C, public comment. Under the public comment, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful if you do. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. I'll stop now and check if we have any public comment on items not appearing on the agenda.
At this time, if you would like to make a public comment on items not on the agenda, please notify the staff liaison by using that raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're dialing in on a phone, you can use *9 to engage that raise hand function. Checking in person to see if there are any public comments, and there are not. And there are no public commenters online.
Okay, moving forward to item D, presentations and proclamations. Item D1, library book survey results.
Let me pull up your presentation here, Rose. Hang on just a moment.
Hello, everyone. I understand that this is here for those who are online, but since we have
There we
people
go.
in the room, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put my back to anyone. All right, so this is gonna be a fairly informal presentation. We did a survey. The reason that we did the survey is because we have this new building that we are opening, and we are buying a new library collection for the building. I have a while ago, probably 9 months, maybe 9 months ago, I stood before you all and talked about how we were planning on creating that collection, and an important part, it was gathering feedback from the community, because I think a really driving force behind everything we're trying to do with the Bellhaven Community Campus is we're trying to reflect what the community wants, and we're trying to provide and we're trying to let the community tell us that. In order to reach out to the community and ask them what they would like in a library collection, and again, this is part of the collection. There is also the part of the collection that is the hot new popular stuff, and there's the part that's well, we're a public library, we should probably have this stuff. This is the community-driven aspect of the collection. And this is just one part of the community-driven aspect of the collection. We did this book survey. We also have been doing interviews on the site with our power users of the library. And once we are open, we are going to continue impacting the collection. Impact, that's the wrong word. We're going to continue to inform the collection based on the feedback that we receive once the doors are open and people start going, well, why don't you have this? Or, oh, it would be so great if you have that. So this is just one part of this collection. So thank you, Nick. We put out these surveys in October. We put the surveys out in English and Spanish. There was a paper survey that was mailed only to households in District 1, and it was available at both of the libraries. There was an online version of the survey. I'm just reading the slide at this point. You can also read, but this is how we deployed this survey. Before it was deployed, my librarians and I sat down together and talked about what we wanted to find out. So is that on the next? I believe that's on. No, and this is what it looked like. Sean was absolutely instrumental in making sure that the mail out packet was informative and had everything that we needed on it. There's quite a bit of back and forth to get it into a nice foldable, mailable package. And you can see it's a little too small to see the actual questions that are on it. And therefore, you can see these are the questions that we asked. We wanted to know what neighborhood people lived in because we wanted to hear from our community, but we especially wanted to be able to weight the feedback based on the people who actually live in the neighborhood that we are trying to serve. We asked demographic information, like not just age, but age groups in the household, the languages spoken at home. And then we asked, what do you use the library for? And then we asked about these collections here, partially because there's a couple that we are planning on bringing to the new location. We're bringing board games and we're bringing video games. And there are a few that we're not currently planning on bringing to the new location. Books on CD, large print, music CDs tend to be tapering off a little bit. So we wanted to sort of test the waters there and see whether we had the right idea. We provided a list of 27 genre categories and said, tell us what you read and watch. Again, we're interested in feedback from the community about what they're interested in, not what we should have. But we did also ask, what should a library have? Because sometimes those answers are different from what you use the library for and what a library should have. We asked for their favorite books and DVDs, and we also opened up for feedback a little bit. We said, anything else? Well, while we're here, and we offered the option for them to provide more feedback in the future so that we could do further information gathering. All right, so we have received 73 responses, and of those 73, 41 people live in District 1. And so those are the respondents. When you are looking, all the rest of the pretty graphs and charts in this in this presentation are those 41 respondents. we have the information from everybody else. We didn't throw it away, but because we were trying to focus on serving this community's needs, that's what you're gonna be seeing. Yes.
Quick question, you got 73 responses, 41 from Bellhaven.
Yes.
How many did you send out? If you look at
Oh,
like how many households did you mail?
Excellent question.
I think it's like 1,000 mailed,
1,000. It was about 1,000.
1,000 mailed,
Yeah.
mailed
And
responses to
this
the.
is, and this is
addresses.
following, we mailed it out, we put it in the newsletter. We put up displays at the Bellhaven Library, inviting people to participate.
Okay,
This is not a bad response rate from this.
yeah. Got it, thank you.
All right, the languages spoken in the home, majority English, but clear next majority was Spanish. We put the numbers by this because the pie chart is just one, looks like a lot in this pie chart. But but you can sort of see this is at least this from the self-select example of people who chose to fill out the survey. This is what our demographics look like. All right, and this is what our residents use the library for. This is what they themselves use it for. Majority books, and they did have the option to check more than one. So most of the 41 respondents do use the library for books, physical books.
Mhm.
There is also high use of ebooks using the holds. Fortunately, only 2 people who don't use the library responded to this survey.
That's impressive.
Well, of the 41 that we're looking at here, I think there were more who don't use the library who respond. There were also some who didn't live in Menlo Park who responded to the
Mhm.
survey of those 73 responses. And in answer to our question of would you use these collections, not at all, sometimes or often. The only one that's making me think maybe I ought to bring it there, because we are gonna have a video game collection. And we are going to have a board games collection. I do think that in this statistic is informed somewhat by the fact that it's a lot of adults responding. We are gonna have some board games for the children in the children's library. But the stats for large print make me think maybe it's not, maybe large print isn't completely over. Maybe we should bring a small large print collection to the new library.
What is large print?
Oh, large print is, it does what it says on the tin. It's books printed with larger
Oh.
print. It's
So you don't
These
have to
days,
wear
they're-
magnifying glass.
yes, they're
okay.
going out a
Mhm.
bit because so many people use e-readers now, and
Yeah.
e-readers, you can
Got
make
it.
whatever size you want. But they're not, large print, book on CD and music CDs still have a very loyal audience. There's a reason we do still have these collections at our library. They do still circ. They circ consistently, but they don't circ a lot. And so we sort of went, oh, well, probably we don't need those, but that stat is making me think perhaps we'll bring a small large print collection over. All right, and this is what our community reads. Many biographies and memoirs across ages. Children's nonfiction is increasingly popular. There's a lot of children's history nonfiction and also children's biography, who was so and so. This, just looking at this myself as a selector, none of this is surprising to me. These are the areas that circ a lot in general. So it's this is not shocking, which is nice. Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked, maybe I'm different, but when I think of what I use the library most for, it's to get a travel guide.
Yeah.
If I'm going somewhere, instead of buying that,
Sure.
travel guide to Italy or the national parks, I go and get it off the shelf so I'm surprised that
Travel guides are
Doesn't-
terribly popular.
but it's not in that.
This is
Did I
one
miss something?
area where I might bring up the fact that I don't know how often a lot of the people who live in Bellhaven get a chance to travel internationally.
Or in California, or
Or-
the national park,
I-
or.
So,
Also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were some pre-populated categories in the survey that people could kind of check the box.
things
And I
are-
don't think it drilled down quite to
That
that level of
fall-
granularity, like travel.
Yeah.
Because it's also 41 people in Bellhaven and
Right,
Mhm.
total of out of 73, so.
certainly, yes, and this is showing you what the 41 said.
Yeah, but then there's the part about how many people said, what's a CD, but.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yes. So yeah, our travel collection serves very nicely.
Mhm.
Libraries are great for books that might be one-time use or might be prohibitively expensive. And that would apply to all communities
Mhm.
everywhere. I think that some of these books might be considered prohibitively expensive, especially one like cookbooks. Cookbooks are quite expensive and they serve very well in Bellhaven. We already knew that. And people like reading about food, people like, reading with the feeling that they might get to make a project out of something, that it's a useful type of reading, but it's also a lot of the time cookbooks have, essentially essays inside of them as well. And that's the sort of expensive material that might be prohibitively expensive. But and that you might not use that much. You might read it once and give it back. So yes, that trend absolutely carries over, but I think it's seen more in really big chunky biographies or cooking.
Mhm.
And this is what everybody watches. This is to help Nick inform his DVD collection.
Mhm.
So,
it's right in line with what is popular, at the library here on Alma Street. So there's nothing that really jumps out at me that's different. There's kind of different flavors about what is more popular at the current branch than is popular here. For instance, horror movies, for
Yeah.
some reason, go better at the branch. And I think that's because the population that's borrowing DVDs at the branch library, I think skews younger
Mhm.
than the population here. So,
Definitely.
we'll have to see if that continues when we move out of the current branch, which is, co-located with a school and
Mhm.
into the new campus building. We'll have to see if that stays
Yeah.
or not.
All right, and then we ask, what are your favorite books? And the most interesting thing in this list to me is faith-based living. And this was an open response. So these sort of buzz terms that you're seeing here, I made those up based on on the responses that we got. We did get responses of mysteries and thrillers more than once. I think there were 4 or 5 different people who said mysteries and thrillers. A lot of, oh, whatever is newest. Oh, I like just coming in to browse. The faith-based living is a difference between that neighborhood and this neighborhood. We don't see books that are sort of about living with faith working as well here. We get them and they serve okay, but there is more of an interest, and that was actually backed up not just in the survey, but in the conversations that I've had with patrons. And then we ask, what should a library have? And I'm pretty happy with these responses. I am wary of the word should. I'd rather know what people do read or use than what they should read or use. But I think that this is a great response. The greatest sort of deviation between should and do is classics. There is a concept that libraries should have classics, and
It's important that it be there,
Yes,
not
it's im-
necessarily that I read.
Yes,
I mean, and that's
Yeah.
legitimate.
yes, absolutely. So that's probably the point of greatest deviation between what people read and what the library should have. And more than one person said essentially items that reflect the community. So these are some of our key takeaways from this survey. People still love books. They still love to check out books. People still don't necessarily want to buy books. The community not only wants a collection that reflects itself, they're also interested in providing input. I know that 41 out of 1,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but I was very happy to get that many responses. And the fact that people put time into it, especially into their long answer responses, it was nice to see. Our teen patrons, the teen respondents, there weren't very many, there were like 3 of them. But they are interested in having more nonfiction in their lives, especially with regard to politics. Teens are increasingly politically charged. They want to know about what's going on in the world. They do. And so that's something that we saw both in the survey, but also in the feedback that we are getting by word of mouth. And the children like the who was books. Everybody wants biographies, so. And yes, and that's sort of a summary of the survey, what we learned from it. I'm happy to take any questions. Just remember that this is one part of the overall collection development for BHCC.
How does the language component influence your selection of the catalog? Because I know there's sort of like the prevailing language at home, but then what's the prevailing language in the communities? So, are we going to have more like Spanish and Hindi and Mandarin representation in the catalog, or is it
Right.
more topical to that?
Well, that's very much why we asked. Part of why we asked is because, so you saw a sort of greatest hits. We broke things down even more. There's a very big spreadsheet that has each of these responses broken down by age range and also by language. So we are going to have a Spanish language collection at BHCC. And part of asking what language people speak had to do with, well, let's just check, let's make sure that what we're seeing, it reflects the community, and it does. So there will be a Spanish language collection, and we're taking the stats from the people who answered the survey in Spanish and said they speak Spanish at home to inform that part of that collection. So that part of the collection. So for the Spanish language collection, those answers might be slightly different. Because we're just taking into account those surveys. So we wanted to be able to tailor it a little bit more. Same thing for the teen collection. We're just looking at the teen respondents and the respondents who said that they have, we did one for teen respondents and one for respondents who say they have a teen in their home. So does that started to answer the question.
Yeah, I think that answers the selection. I was just curious if on a percentage basis, more of the catalog would be
Yes.
in non-English.
Yes, and we're going to have a world language picture book collection to start off with.
Could
And-
I interject though, because I think there maybe is a distinction between the library's overall collection, and I think Rose is maybe focusing on the Bellhaven Library specifically, so I think I hear 2 different things. Because obviously there's this facility is quite a bit larger and can house a wider variety of items on the shelf, whereas the Bellhaven Library is relatively small and there's only so many, just inches of shelf space available. So those collections really need to be a little more focused on what people actually are coming in to use. But knowing that we can access kind of anything that we have in our collection as well as other libraries. So I just wanted to point out there's a little distinction between the overall collection and
Right.
what's on the shelf in the new building.
I'm sorry, if I could interrupt just for a moment, maybe we want to call for public comment before we continue the discussion. Sorry, I know. Want to get to the good stuff too. So at this time, if you'd like to make a public comment on the presentation, on the responses to the user survey, please use that raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Press *9 if you're dialing in, or indicate if you are present. And I see no public commenters on this item. Pardon the interruption. Please continue.
Commissioners? Any other questions, please?
I was curious, I know this is for, obviously collection development needs to get the right book stock, but I noticed that the respondents didn't say how to use the library, and out of 41, does it like 21 using for program events, research information is high, and just sort of physically being in the library. And you just mentioned it's a smaller space, but also a much more desirable space presumably than where the current residents have been.
Oh, yes,
accessing the library. So I guess I'm curious about what, how it's gonna work with the whole building. I guess when we go there in May, we'll see, and whether you have plans to just figure out when people see the building, how do they actually want to use it other than books?
We are certainly having those conversations, although it is not this presentation. Yes, absolutely. It is a much more appealing space. Yes.
I could take a crack at it, and maybe we could talk about it a little more under, like the department updates, but certainly there's other spaces throughout the building that library users would want to avail themselves of, and although there's like 5 different programs in the building, there's going to be a lot of overlap. So in particular, like the maker space is a space where a lot of programs that would happen that could either be like kind of a library program, or it could be a senior center program, or it could be a youth center program. And there's a few other spaces like that. For example, there's a flexible classroom that in some cases would be like literally just like used for fee-based classes that people might actually pay the recreation program to take. There might be free library classes in there. There could be just community groups renting or reserving the space to use it. So there's quite a bit of crossover there. And so it wouldn't necessarily be confined to the 4 walls of the quote unquote library space in the building, if that helps.
It does, and I guess figuring out how to collect the data and survey things when it's all in. I think once we see the space, we'll have a better sense of.
I'll just make one more comment, then I'll stop so we can get back to the presentation. There, this commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed the results of a community-wide recreation and community programs survey, which I believe was in spring of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So we can kind of call that back for the new commissioners. It was very comprehensive as far as like the types of programs folks want, in particular in the new facilities. So we can kind of distribute that afterwards as a callback to, I think, the information you're kind of asking about. Great question.
So I'm not dissing anything about the survey and the 73 people and the 41 people in Bellhaven. But what steps are you taking to go beyond the survey? And like in particular, like the question about like language. Yes, it's, you get some information by what language is spoken in the home and what, I don't recall if there was another question beyond, what language did you fill out the survey in? But like, as I think the main library is finding, you know, there's German storytelling and there's Mandarin, so they might not speak certain languages at home, but they might be, they, you know, were native previously in the language and they want to have that language in the children's section more, or even if they speak Spanish at home, what is the makeup of that collection for the Spanish-speaking community versus other communities? Like, how do you go beyond the survey to sort of ascertain the actual demand?
So for, what is called the opening day collection,
Mhm.
the collection that is there when we open the doors. We've got the survey and, we've also been doing one-on-one interviews essentially with community members. We put focus groups out there to the community and the community did not bite. We had sign-up sheets, I believe we pushed it out in newsletter form, I think.
Mhm.
We hand contacted all of the people who said that they'd like to say more from this survey. And as well as a couple of other community stakeholders. There was no interest in that, so we changed tack. And we decided to just sit in the library and, sort of be the, excuse me, would you mind for a minute? And so, now granted, that's also a subset of, those are our power users. We've got people who are in the current library space 3 days a week, 4 days a week. So by virtue of the fact that there are power users, they've got the advantage of being the voice in the room. But yes,
Oh, carry on. I wanted to let you know, I had something to follow on.
I was just going to say that that's what we've done for the opening day collection. So we've gotten word of mouth and the survey responses. I am very much looking forward to having the doors open because I feel that we're never done developing a collection. We're going to be much more able to shape the collection to the community once the doors are open and people have come in, because it's a shiny new building with shiny new services. And hopefully, there are people in the community who don't, for whatever reason, quite grasp what the library is or what it does. There are some folks who are from a place where libraries don't do what we do. And there are some folks who haven't set foot in a library since they were a kid and don't understand the wealth of resources that we have available and that it's not just books. Yeah, I've got.
Yeah, thank you for that. Great question, and thanks for that information. Just as a follow-on, I think that's talking quite a bit about like the qualitative type data, asking people, getting a survey. And also, I think Rose started to allude to this, there's a little bit more on the quantitative side. What's the actual usage as a piece of data? We actually have that now. There are people actually checking out in the various languages, either at that location or in this location, or actually countywide, although we really do tend to focus on our area of the county. The San Mateo is a big county, and it can really kind of vary depending on what part of the county.
I'm
what
at like
languages.
one piece of data, I started to get like down in the weeds, but can you figure out like, residents of Menlo Park who are using the main library, but live in that neighborhood? So they might not, if they're a power user and they live in Bellhaven, they already know not to go to the Bellhaven branch and come here instead. Is there any way to
Yeah,
kind of like
we actually
that?
do. Now, the last time we did a geographic information systems mapping of library users, I think was around 2019, where we took some stats out of our database, like the most recent checkout, which location did it occur, and we sort of mapped that out and did kind of a heat map that showed a higher at the time. It's a higher concentration of younger users at the Bellhaven branch library compared to some other neighborhoods. The other really important piece of information, just back to language, is census data. So we actually have that down to like the census tract level. The census does that every couple of years through the American Community Survey. So that's also a key piece of information that really helps us to understand, like really what are the languages spoken. That's obviously a lot more granular. I would say probably more solid data than, our qualitative survey. So we do have that. And, from that, I think it all feeds to, like the primary language other than English that's spoken in Menlo Park is Spanish, although there are others. And so we want to, make sure that we're using all of those sources of information to inform the collection.
Well,
Thank you.
on that note, do any of the commissioners have recommendations on how they can improve their data collection? Sounded like your question was motivated, but I thought maybe you had on how they can improve it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they're, moving forward, there's gonna maybe be more collection of data, like with the heat map and to determine, how usage is changing and evolving, over time, maybe not, give it a year or two, into the future. There's I was just thinking of one follow-up question, about, opening day collection.
Mm.
What percentage of budget is left for opening day plus to augment with additional items that people are saying,
Of the
oh, aha.
opening day collection budget?
The opening day budget collection, and then there's a budget to
Yes.
augment it.
Yeah.
What kind of percentage of that, like, total?
About half and half.
Oh, okay, wow, that's a lot.
The opening day collection is a little over half of what I've been given as a budget for making sure that it's not a large collection. It's about 5,000 items, which is about 400 feet of shelving. So.
In-house that is, obviously, there's access to the full collection in this building, and we're making arrangements for there to be sort of like daily replenishments from this
Right.
facility. Also, in the ideal world, a fully half or 2/3 of the library collection is actually not on our shelves
Yes.
because it's checked out and in people's homes at any given time.
Yes.
So
Right.
we're hoping that in the opening day, basically the shelves immediately get kind of picked pretty clean. And we're gonna be replenishing
Yeah.
right away. And Rose and her team have done a great job sort of mapping out like
Yeah.
sequences of new book deliveries with that expectation.
It's really gonna the collection there is really gonna have to earn its real estate
Yes.
in ways that,
Mhm.
where you have more space like you have at this library here, you can kind of carry some things that aren't really pulling their weight, those things that maybe we think we should have, but the community isn't clamoring for. And I think it's really
Not
gonna be,
as much space for should have.
there's
Mhm.
not gonna be as much space for should have, but we will be able to pull those things in from this location or through the
Mhm.
Link Plus system from
Yeah.
wherever we need to get it, or we'll just buy it is the other thing is, I think we're really gonna be much more kind of demand driven
Mm.
collection at the
Absolutely.
campus.
Yeah.
I was just gonna make one comment. I seem to recall all the surveys that were done when we were first trying to plan for that library.
Mhm.
All the efforts that were made to put a little folding table out and have snacks and all sorts of stuff. And, no matter what you do, if you can break 100, this is a huge survey. Even if it's a very, it's barely, not even low double digit percentage representation. So hooray for that. It does seem to me that the place to really get your answers is gonna be once the building's open.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, because I think the problem fundamentally is, there's probably a lot of people in Bellhaven and just not immediate area here
Mhm.
that don't use the library because it isn't really a library.
Yeah.
And it's, you wouldn't know it and you may feel uncomfortable going to what is an elementary school.
Right.
to use resources that may not be perceived as age appropriate.
Well, and it's not even just the collection. One of the fill in the blank responses that we had to this survey was, I'm in a wheelchair. I can't get into the current library's door is too hard to open.
Yeah, so I suspect that, because,
There's just gonna be so much
Yeah.
more.
so my impression is that library that's currently been there is not necessarily representative of what historically a library is perceptively to be in this community, in this day and age. And what's coming is sort of a more modern version of what we're sitting in now, right? So even if people occasionally made the effort to come over here to use this library, it's still not representative of what resources and things are gonna be tapping into there. So it seems to me that once people get a feel for what that is and what it could be, that's actually probably the best time to tap into people and say, okay, now that you've seen it and you see what we've got, what do we need?
What do you
What
want?
are we missing?
Yeah,
And my guess is that you're gonna get a whole different group of people showing
I
up,
would think so, yes.
giving more answers. Also, my recommendation would be, since the sections are broken up geographically, to make a point of having at least a little, an effort to try to capture people wherever they are. So not just at the front door, but over where the kids are, over where the older groups are. And I think you'll probably get a real good sense of what people are looking for when they go there. Then I'd be interested in seeing how it differs. So that's all I got.
I just want to chime in as the city librarian. I agree with everything Commissioner Cohen has said about the deficiencies of the current Bellhaven branch library, but I do have to kind of put in a plug for that little branch library and say that the concept of a school public library at the time in the 1990s was thought to be like super innovative. And it was a great way to get that done with some redevelopment money that was available for renovating the school. And in exchange for the city giving that money, they put that in there. And that model has worked in other communities, but I will be very honest, it never quite clicked in Menlo Park. But I did want to just give a little bit of
and that
a
is-
shout out to Bellhaven Branch Library, the little library that tried, but it doesn't quite do. it.
Don't
And I agree.
misunderstand. I mean,
No, and I don't, but I.
the retrospectoscope's a powerful tool. I wield it often. It's one of my greatest strengths is understanding what happened that didn't work after it happened.
And that's.
I'm great at that. You should pick lotto tickets.
My kids are even better at that.
I'm good at yesterday's numbers also. But no, but I think there's probably a large swath of the community that, as a result of limited or no experience with what's currently there, irrespective of what service it rendered, as an alternative to nothing, or making a real difficult effort to get to this end of town. I think the whole perception of what it could be and what it will be isn't necessarily fully realized or understood yet. That was my point.
Yeah, I think a one mantra I've been saying around in recent weeks is that seeing is believing. I think when people see this new facility, it's going to be just so different than what was there now or before. And it'll be a real revolution, because it will be so much improved.
Just to add on, yes, I'm very much looking forward to having a more functional, more library-like library. I've been working over there on Wednesday nights. That space is in use. There's regularly 35 people in that little room before the Aztec dance class starts.
In the current branch library?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is in use. It is especially used by tutors and kids after school. So it's not just, it has seen an uptick in use since I started working here, certainly. But it is still very much in the spirit of the school library. And a little forbidding to your average Joe off the street.
Great.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, please.
So what is the plan for collecting all of this feedback once the library is open? Are you gonna leave the surveys out? Have kiosks?
Oh, we do, short answer, yes,
Okay.
we're going to, we still have a bunch of the surveys, and I'm sort of wondering whether, you know, that the phrasing on them is very much, we're going to have a library, and so I don't know whether we can use those again, or whether we just want to wake that online survey back up. But I think that we'd love to see feedback forms available immediately, but I think also some of it is just a matter of putting it on our staff to have those conversations with people who come in. Having our staff take note of what people ask for that we don't have. That's already how we
Operate.
develop a collection to suit the community. So there will be a passive element to it, but yes, there will absolutely be some sort of. Please fill out this survey. Great.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we will move to item E. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Seeing is believing. We'll look through our retrospectoscope.
The
Retrospective.
retrospectoscope.
I love it.
I have one in the car. I'll give you that.
Alright.
Write it down.
All right, section E, regular business. Under regular business, the library commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require library commission approval. We would like to now approve the minutes from January 29th, 2024 special meeting. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
At this time, if you would like to make a public comment on this item, please notify the staff liaison by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're dialing in, you can use *9 to engage the raise hand function. Just a point of information for commissioners, there are no remote attendees right now. And there aren't any in-person attendees right now, but we are still required to do the same public comment call. And so seeing that there is no public comment, back to you,
All right,
back
thank
to the
you.
commission.
Would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Happy to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
And we have a second. We have a second. Excellent. Nick?
So now I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. Even though you're all here and I can see you. Commissioner, this is to, the vote is to approve the minutes from the January 29th, 2024 special meeting. Commissioner Chen Reiki, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Cohen, how do you vote?
Proof.
Commissioner Herrick, how do you vote?
Approve, I'll say approve. I wasn't there. I should abstain.
That's okay.
It's okay. If you can vote to approve, even if you weren't there, if you found them non-objectionable, you can vote to approve. Commissioner Orton, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Pollock, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Wise, how do you vote?
Approve.
And Vice Chair Singh, how do you vote?
Approve.
The motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Shifting now to section E2 on the agenda, recommend updates to library and community services departmental policies, bulletin board policy, exhibits and display policy, user account privacy policy. Nick and Sean, over to you.
I can do a really quick intro. From time to time, we bring policies to the commission. Usually to sort of check in with you to see if, don't know my own strength. Yeah. That's odd.
He feels very strongly about.
I know, I'm not angry about the policies, I swear. To check in with you if something has changed, but also because we peel through our policies every once in a while, just to check in and see if they're still pertinent. So that's what we have for you. Tonight, we have 3 policies. I can pull them up and show you the red lines or the text on the screen here. So we have the bulletin board policy, the exhibits and display policy, and the user account privacy policy. The bulletin board policy is an existing policy that we have some changes to. The exhibits and displays and the user account privacy policies are newer policies that we're bringing to you to have a look at and to hear your feedback and hopefully get your recommendation for approval. And so I'll stop talking. Maybe we could go to public comment and then we can have a discussion about the policies.
Great, Nick. Do we have any public comments on
At-
this item?
At this point, if you would like to make a public comment on item E2, recommending updates to library and community services departmental policies, please use that raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom screen or *9 if you're dialing in. If you're in person, please come up with a comment card. And seeing no comments, back to you.
All
Through the
right.
chair, if I may, maybe Nick, it might be helpful just to put the PDFs on the screen one at a time. Not to read through them or anything, but just in case that's a helpful reference for folks.
Great.
And also for anyone who looks at the video later, they can kind of see quickly the content and if
I
they want to.
will do so.
Are there a lot of views of our meetings?
There are some. When
I mean,
you,
on the non-naming of the Bellhaven Community Center. meeting.
what happens is the recordings of the meetings of the Zoom recordings are then made available through the city's YouTube account. So then, and they're linked from the web pages. We will get a few on each meeting. If it's non-controversial, you know, it's in the dozen or less, but still that's more often than the attendees that we have virtually and in person. And then if it is something that is of real interest to the community, then we'll get more views.
And the evening's still young, anything could happen.
Yes.
So this one could be one for the.
That's
one for
true.
the
All the
good.
opportunities to go viral.
Bulletin board policy, I'll start with that one.
Spicy.
Yes, I see bulletin board.
Let's see, let me make this a little easier to see.
Well,
Hopefully.
the main, so I'll just
Yeah, I was
quickly
gonna
jump
say,
in.
would you
The
mind-
main tweaks here are to define the locations to which the policy may apply. So to basically say this would apply to the facilities managed by library and community services, which by extension would include the Bellhaven Community Campus. And it doesn't necessarily apply to other facilities like, say, City Hall. Then also it just reorders and reformats the document to kind of match our current document standards. And then also one of the things we've incorporated in our policies is to add a timeline for when we will review the policy next. In this case, I think it's every 2 years. No, I'm sorry, every 5 years is what's proposed. So those are the three main tweaks to this policy. Pretty administrative stuff.
And then I will go and bring up the exhibits and displays policy.
And this references the exhibits and display for both branches, correct?
Well, this one we're looking at right now, I'm sorry, are you on bulletin board or exhibits?
Exhibits.
Oh, sorry, yes.
So exhibits for both. So the forthcoming exhibit space and the exhibit space we have here in the front.
Correct,
Got it. Okay.
correct. Or just any exhibit or display. There could be various other places, for
Right,
example,
like I guess this
sculptures
is-
in the middle of the
I
room
guess
here.
this is an exhibit space now.
So this
Yeah,
is brand new, so
technically.
there's no red line. This is something we
Yeah,
just.
this is brand new.
Correct, and so this policy is really to sort of codify and capture in writing what our current practice and past practice has been and make it more formal and transparent for everybody.
Scroll down a little bit, sorry.
So on the bulletin board policy, because it's new and codifying, is it in response or reaction to any issues that arose, or is it just, oh, you know, while we're updating the other policies, let's, update this one and codify it as well?
Great question. Not in response to any like particular issue or concern. However, we do have the new building opening, and so we would anticipate that people might have questions. And so it makes sense to just sort of capture everything now, so everyone's on the same page.
So would you mind doing me a favor? Could you
Sure.
just scroll, I guess, up? Yeah.
Mhm.
So, so my only question is, and I'm basing this on the history of as I've seen and understood exhibits within the library, this branch.
Mhm.
And there's exhibit space downstairs that I think was used, wasn't necessarily viewed as exhibit space. I don't know, you'll tell me, but the Historical Society was using the space downstairs as their place to put in historical submissions and artifacts and educational things. So how are we thinking of, how does this impact historical, the use of space here or there for historical representation and submissions and presentations in the future, or does it?
Yeah, great question. So the Historical Association, the Menlo Park Historical Association, they actually lease a space in the lower level here for their office. And then outside of that office, in kind of like the foyer down there, if you will, there's like a display case that they, I think, have very consistently for years, have just had a display of some of their materials. That area is actually no longer like kind of open to the public except during their office hours. So in a way, it's almost like not really considered subject to this policy because it's more of an extension of their office space than a public display area. For other areas of the building, a proposed historic display, we just kind of go through this process.
Okay, so so that was my question. So if the folks at the Historical Society want to propose presentations or displays either here upstairs or in the new structure, they would go through this process.
Correct. We just want to have the same
And they would be
process.
eligible to be a part of that, just like any other organization or whatever. Okay, good.
Yes, although it looks like Rose might
Oh,
have.
yeah, no, I'm just, yes, anding, the glass case that you see behind you is actually there because I was contacted by the Historical Association and they're very interested in putting out a few more things. You can see they already have some pictures out here. And, you know, this space is sort of a little bit of a liminal space at the moment because it houses the pool table and houses the senior annex and it's very modular. And, you know,
Mhm.
eventually this space we'll see even more transformation, but that's why that glass case is there. So yes, they, like any other organization, can reach out to us, but because we do have a close personal friendship, we try to be accommodating.
Yeah, ergo the policy, right? So if we have one or more groups that are like asking about, putting things up, we want to make sure we have a process so any group can
Mhm.
kind of have that
Yeah.
same consideration.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
On Bellhaven campus, is there a place that community members can post something that doesn't have to go through the bulletin board policy? Like I know out here, there's this round thing that I'm assuming you guys don't review what goes on it, or maybe somebody in the city pulls off objectionable material, but is there a not, because you said this really is not spicy, and what I worry about is like it was built by a corporation on one side, and we're kind of a corporation on another side from a certain perspective, so is there a avenue for?
Yeah, good question. So there isn't really a corresponding thing like that kiosk out there, which by the way, although it's near the library, it's not covered by this policy because we don't deal with it. The library doesn't. It's a city hall thing, I think. And there isn't really a kiosk like that programmed at the Bellhaven Community Campus. So at this point, really, the only avenues would be either the exhibits and displays policy or like a bulletin board that we would probably have in the library space.
And then,
Not to say we would rule it out, I'm just saying there currently isn't
It's
one
okay,
in the plan, yeah.
sharing the last one here.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
but,
go ahead.
One more question, maybe it's, kind of, touching on a third rail, or maybe it's covered elsewhere in the, community center, but is there a standing exhibition on the history of Bellhaven and the challenges that they've faced with redlining and, the school district, et cetera, et cetera? Is there a standing display in the community center?
We are
Talking more about that
actually
history?
working with the Historical Association and more specifically Bellhaven residents to develop such a display. Whether there's a permanent display or whether it's more of a rotating
Mhm.
set or series of displays. We're still kind of working out. We are very interested in capturing the history in some sort of
Mhm.
permanent or semi-permanent, like a booklet of some kind of, I don't know, Rose, if you have a little more to add there.
Not a lot of progress has been made on this, but it is absolutely in the works.
Okay.
And that includes the history of Odetta Harris and her involvement in the community, et cetera. That, I know that was talked about at the.
She's certainly a big part of the neighborhood's history, so it would almost certainly need to include Ms. Harris in any kind of compendium of that type. And I think one of the things that Rose and I had been kind of talking with a few folks about is that you producing a history in written form that would be a book that would end up in our, I think, our local author
Yeah.
collection or
Definitely.
local interest collection. That's a little separate from a display, but
Mhm.
the same idea, and that would provide content that could then be used for interpretive displays. So while we're on the subject, a couple spaces in the building, there is a pretty long kind of hallway wall that would lend itself very nicely to rotating community displays.
Mhm.
There are certainly opportunities, I think in particular on the two library spaces for those kinds of like rotating displays.
There's a lot of really nice sort of built-in shelving in both library spaces at the new campus building, some of which is not super
Right.
functional as book
It's
shelving.
very nice built-in shelving that's not really great for books.
So there are opportunities there to have some really nice displays that could be permanent or semi-permanent.
Really looking forward.
And then if I might, the last policy that we would like you to consider and recommend is the user account privacy policy. And user privacy from the library side is something that we take very seriously. And there are kind of, I don't know if I'm gonna call them Uber policies, but policy recommendations that we follow from the American Library Association, for instance. This is kind of starting to wrap them all together for not only the library user account, but we have another piece of software called Explore Recreation, which is what we use to book our recreation classes and spaces. So this is kind of outlining what we will use and will not use user account information for, to be sort of grammatically incorrect, but just to sort of let you know. So happy to hear your thoughts on these, on this policy.
So can I ask a basic question?
Sure.
So since there's a shift depending upon who you are and how old you are to use non-book related borrowing, right? So I can use an account to get on and rent a film or rent a book on tape or whatever and download it onto a device and use it that way, as opposed to me coming into the library and taking something off the shelf and borrowing it. So this policy basically says that you'll respect my right and privilege as a consumer and a community member to come to a public place, borrow something, and have the privacy of what I borrowed and what I read and what I used be maintained. That's essentially what this policy is. I read it, understood. How do you carry that over to electronic borrowing?
Good question. I mean, you have to, in some cases, trust that the vendors that you're working with will provide that same level of protection that we provide for in-person borrowing, but because we are not the creators of the software, but the companies that do this sort of business are very attuned to
Right. Sensitive
to the library's interest in user privacy, and so they don't usually sell, you know, your borrowing information to the algorithm, because that would make all of the libraries all of their hair stand up and they'd get very.
Understood.
I should add, though, there are also service agreements with those
Yes.
vendors that really stipulate, what data needs to be protected, and it's very consistent with our policy. I think what he's kind of getting at is we don't directly control those vendors, and
But we do
sometimes
through
data
the
breaches
agreement process.
do happen, but in the agreement itself, that's what's agreed to, if they would not
Yeah.
allow the information.
So the only reason I ask is because I assume that the problem becomes once you start involving other parties. And you start, so let's say I'm doing this from my home computer. I watch enough police dramas that that what can happen is that everything that's on your computer is
The
searchable.
library will be
and
closing
explorable.
in 20 minutes. If you have
And of
anything
course, a
you'd
lot
like
of
to
things
check
are
out,
unfortunately
please bring it to the
hackable and
front now.
accessible.
Restrooms will be closed in 10 minutes.
And I guess and this is more, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think in plain language, making sure that people understand that as far as everything that the library system as a artificially enclosed space can control and respect your privacy, that everything that interfaces with it on outwards, including you're using your own computers and devices interfacing, carries with it the same risks that any other device would, and that there's no way. I think we owe it to people to make them understand that we'll do the best we can within the scope of what we have control over, but let's be honest, in large part, many of these interfaces, once you've clicked on and you're in, there's no way to know, and there's no way to guarantee. And I do think that the platforms like Meta and X and all these others bury a lot of that language in many, many pages in very small font. Nobody reads it, right? And even if you read it, you wouldn't understand it. But here, I think we owe it to the community at large to make it in plain language in English, and not to scare people or to dissuade them from wanting to use these resources, but to understand that if it's even a remote concern, that we're going to do our best, but it is what it is. And saying that in some way that is potable, I think I would like to see an effort made to see if somebody could look at it and review it and just make sure that an average person with an average, let's say, middle school education, and reading level and aptitude could understand that. Because I think we owe it to people.
I think it's a good idea. I think part of the education that we do here in libraries with the staff is to talk to people about these issues when they come in to use the internet or when they borrow a laptop or a Wi-Fi hotspot. There's also a really good documentary called Terms and Conditions, which is on this very same topic. I think it's probably about 10 years old now or so, but it's it's all about the things that you sign that you don't read and what you're actually agreeing to that you don't realize that you're agreeing to. But that kind of media literacy is something that we are very interested in sort of talking to our users about. So to the extent that we could do something like this in the policy, maybe it's in the policy, but I don't know who reads the policies. You know what I mean? But maybe there's a better way to like have some sort of information literacy, media literacy programming that could help bring these things up so that people.
And I
would
imagine
understand.
we're, I'm guessing, I mean, I'm an old guy, right? So I don't assume that this hasn't already been discussed, addressed, and probably dealt with in a very clever way by someone else. And now it's just a question of just finding who's done this well and has generated some qualifiers or explanations or clarity that has already been proven to be clear and concise and articulate. Because I think if there's a way to bolt on something or just put some sort of plain language understanding for people. Because I got a funny feeling that based on what Rose was talking about earlier, that when the new library opens, there's a whole new audience of people that are going to now become aware of all the resources that aren't just physically in the building, but that the libraries avail themselves to. And I think there's probably going to be a lack of clear understanding as to what it means and what the benefits and risks are. And that's all I'm saying. So I don't want to belabor it, but
No, it's a really valid point, and so we we made an attempt at that in this
Mhm.
policy. It's only 2 pages long. And we tried to, in a couple of places, really make that as kind of plain language sort of known. For example, on the first page, there's a part that it says, the Library and Community Services Department does not sell, license, or disclose user account information to any other party except through authorized service agreements with third-party vendors for the purposes of providing official City of Menlo Park services and programs to residents, or as otherwise provided in this policy or required by law. So that's the first really plain spoken, like, we do share it with third-party vendors. And then under user account information protections, there's several bullet points where it says library and community services user account information may be shared with, and one of the bullet points is third-party vendors under duly executed contract with the City of Menlo Park to provide electronic services to users, including but not limited to ebooks, digital and streaming library materials, and recreation registration systems. And another bullet point is that it may be shared with others required by such lawful process, order, or subpoena as may be authorized under the authority of and pursuant to federal, state, or local law related to various discovery procedures or investigatory powers. So we tried to kind of keep it as like succinct and distilled as possible to make it known that, there are other parties that have access to the information. And including law enforcement could potentially, although there's other areas in here where we make clear that, especially when it comes to printed books, we actually do not even retain the records. And that goes all the way back to the Patriot Act days, that we, unless there's a fine on your card or the item is currently checked out, or you opted into keeping track, as soon as you return the item, it's gone from our records entirely. So even if there was a request to see the information, we don't have it. But
Yeah.
electronic, it's different because.
Well,
we
and
don't
that,
hold
and that's why I'm calling it out. And,
Yeah.
and I bet you, like, actually, this is the first time I've heard said what you just said, that I understand that I knew the legacy that electronic materials carry with them, and God knows how it through all time and matter. But it's kind of nice to know that old school stuff, you used to have to write your name on the little thing. And as long as that piece of paper still existed in the book, I guess you could track it. Now there is no such thing. So, but that may be helpful for people to just know. Think about it. And you may want to just do a little box that says, what does all this legal mumbo jumbo mean? In case you're interested, when you borrow stuff that's electronic, that's downloadable, that's we'll do our best, but recognize that there are third parties involved. However, when you actually come to the library and you borrow something that's physical, that you're holding in your hand, in case you're interested, the kinds of legacy recognition and acknowledgement of that doesn't exist. And that might be helpful for people. Fortunately, we live in a part of the country and the world where you don't have to worry about these things most of the time. But I think people should know. Anyway,
Yeah.
You get it.
Mhm.
That was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually have a question about the opposite thing that we're sort of arguing here, and that I think because of the Patriot Act, the purging of the actual data is excellent, except for the fact that anonymized retention of the data is sort of an operational requirement, because we've been asking here, can we? And so I guess my question and there are certain ILSs that can do that now. So, and I don't know what you're doing in terms of Biblical Commons overlay and everything, but that would be something I would strongly encourage if we're not doing it yet. That, sure, that person's individual reading is, but their profile in terms of age, what community they're borrowing from, and that borrowing data, because we sort of, with the Patriot Act, as librarians had to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we do want data to meet
Right.
operational needs. I guess that's the question.
Well, we keep data for the items. So we can see, oh, this thing lives at Bellhaven Library and has been checked out this many times.
Right, but I'm talking about the rich data that all these companies that we're talking about that are, are pulling that data. They're definitely anonymizing and keeping all that really, really valuable data to make a profit off of us. And so I'm saying operationally, as a library to serve our community better and really know our Bellhaven users as opposed to the ones driving over from somewhere else. That, and it's really hard to do, but there are, I would strongly encourage.
Yeah, there are
not to look.
software, there are products that are marketed to libraries like ours that have this sort of overlay that give you that kind of deeper insight into library user behavior. So it's a little bit like what is that Orange Boy, which is the advertising one that's used. There was one called Orange Boy, I think, but basically consumer behavior mapped geographically. And there are companies that say they can do that with your library user database. We subscribed to one 10 or more years ago, and I didn't find it particularly useful, but that's not kind of how my brain works. So it may be that there are useful things out there. It's figuring out whether our librarians could make use of that and whether it's worth it given what it costs.
The library will be closed in 10 minutes. If you're working on the laptop, please start saving your work and shutting down. The restrooms are now locked.
Okay, laptop. Thank you.
All right.
The previous conversation made me think of the sort of the other side of the equation. So I am a avid user of like the ebook collection, the audiobooks. I came into the library one day. It's like, oh, I think maybe there's some way that I can get to like New York Times newspaper subscriptions, and so I'll ask the reference library and I'll figure that out, and then I'll click on the link and I'll get the subscription. It's for 3 days, but I'm looking for a particular article, and so that hits the spot. Is there any way to track the metadata on the other side of like, because the other challenge that I've had is I went online and it ended up on the Peninsula library system. Oh, okay, I want to reserve this audio book. Oh yeah, there are 3 in use of this audio book. You are 27th in line, and if you're lucky, they don't say if you're lucky. Yeah, so I many times I've gotten, the access to that audio book like 3 months later, and I forgot why I reserved it in the first place. But is there a way to track, oh, there's a big demand from Menlo Park users for this audiobook or this electronic copy, and so that you'll purchase more of that electronic asset in the future?
Yes, and we
Mhm.
do.
Okay,
We can see the items that are in high demand. For our ebooks, we purchase almost entirely off of those high demand holds lists.
Mhm.
Because ebooks are an increasingly used resource. And there is distressingly little regulation around the people selling the ebooks. And so they're massively expensive. And so when we are deciding how to spend our budget, it's almost solely based on demand. It is solely based.
Demand or requests. for
Yeah,
specific
yes,
titles.
exactly. The demand is either from somebody asking for it or from just the highest holds
And we can distinguish
per location.
per location.
Yes.
So we know the Menlo Park, there's a wait list of 73 people countywide, and 15 of those are Menlo Park residents. So we should probably, I think in the old days, we used to try to keep a 1-to-5 ratio for copies to holds. Even that, if you look at it, is 15 weeks, so that's
Right.
not great,
We
right?
bring that down if we can.
But we
Mhm.
try to keep it at least at that level.
Thank you.
And if you forget why you put a hold on it, maybe just email the help desk directly and we'll just try to buy one rather than having to have you wait that long. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, I guess, do we want to vote on these or do we want to wait till you make modifications to reflect Commissioner Cohen's suggestions and vote on them next week, or sorry, next month?
You know, recommendations are
why
helpful,
don't we now-
so if you feel like you wanna do them one at a time, that's also helpful.
Yeah, I mean, or we could always, the goal here wasn't to slow down the process of putting something in place. And I don't have any objection to what's in there right now,
Okay.
not that anybody cares what I think. But I was just thinking if in future reiterations, there may be a couple of things that might be worth thinking about.
Okay.
So, I mean, the whole point of bringing this forward today was to start to put something in place
Mhm.
so that you have something to codify, particularly with the new library opening. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with.
Okay.
I appreciate the consideration, but don't hold progress on my beat.
All right, so then, without further objection, can I get a motion to approve all three at the same time?
I move to approve all three proposed policy updates.
Excellent. Can I have a second? We have a second. Nick, would you like to take roll call?
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend updates to Library and Community Services Departmental policies, including bulletin board policy, exhibits and displays policy, user account privacy policy. So I will do a roll call. Commissioner Chen Reiki, how do you vote?
Approved.
Commissioner Cohen, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Herrick, how do you vote? Commissioner Orton, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Pollock, how do you vote?
Approve.
Commissioner Wise, how do you vote?
Approve.
And Vice Chair Singh, how do you?
Approved.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Excellent. Shifting now to item F, informational items. Informational items are transmitted to the Library Commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. Nick, will you please provide a brief introduction to section F1 advisory body attendance report?
Yes, so annually, the city clerk's office, which is collecting attendance information on all of the advisory bodies, sort of puts that out as a report to the city council. So we thought we would bring it here to you guys to take a look at. I can pull it up on the screen. It's not particularly thrilling, but that's the idea. There is in the sort of rules for our commissions and advisory bodies, a stipulation that you commissioners or advisory body members should attend more than 2/3 or more of the meetings in a calendar year. Less than that, and you could be removed by the city council. That doesn't happen often. I don't know that it has happened necessarily. Usually when life takes commissioners out of the into the attendance zone where they might be at risk of being removed, they usually come to some sort of agreement with us. Either they can't attend, so they drop off the commission, or they can. There is actually a provision for taking a leave of absence from a commission if anyone's ever interested in it. So just this, which is on the screen, is the report from the Library Commission. There is an oddity in March of last year. There were 2 meetings in March of last year. I thought that was funky, but I went back and looked, and there were 2 meetings in March of last year. And I don't think we had any sort of, there's like a list of excused absences. Basically, all of your absences are excused if you email me and say that you're not gonna be there, and it's like, okay. So it's not like I'm going through a list of, well, were you sick? But you know, we don't drill down in that detail, but just so you know, that's what it looks like. See, former Commissioner Earhart had a 200% attendance, because he only was showing for 1 month, was that March with the 2 meetings. But this is just for your information and your awareness that this is being passed along to the city council.
Great. Do we have any public comment on this item?
At this point, if anyone would like to make a comment on item F1, advisory body attendance report, use that raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to notify staff, *9 if you're dialing in, or approach with a comment card in person. Seeing no comments on F1.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions from the commissioners? Nope, all right. Shifting now to item F2, Library and Community Services Department updates. Nick, will you provide a brief introduction to this item?
It will be as brief as possible, given the time. We provide statistics and in department updates monthly. Last month at the joint meeting, there were some questions about certain kinds of statistics. So we attempted to bring that back this time. There was some desire to see statistics, sort of comparative statistics year over year for our library location, but also comparative statistics with area libraries. So this was our first attempt to sort of do that. Interested in hearing your feedback, and happy to discuss some of the statistics that we did bring back to see if they met what you were asking about. It's a long-winded way of saying, how's this? I guess. Is this what you were asking for? Is this sort of stuff useful? Yes, no, more or less. A lot of these statistics are pulled from the state library site, where we all report up our statistics to just a couple of some things to point out that I thought were interesting. Well, it's not gonna, I have to stop share before I shift screens. Some of the comparative statistics across libraries that we took are need a little bit of background, because you know, different libraries have different populations that they're serving, different budgets, for instance. So these are all California libraries. If you want to sort of zero in on some that are comparable as to size, demographics, and budget, it's really interesting. It's Burlingame Library, which is comparable sort of size. Their budget's bigger than ours, but for size and demographics, they are comparable. And Beverly Hills Public Library is actually comparable for size and demographics, even though their budget is larger than ours. And we compare favorably in this particular statistic, which is circulation per capita, with both of those. But you can actually,
Go Menlo Park.
you can look at this data online, and you can pull it and take a look at it in all of the different aspects that are there.
I'm curious about the towns that did not appear here. I was just like, I wonder how we compare to San Carlos or Los Altos, and those ones weren't on here. So how did you decide which ones made this list?
I'll
Well,
turn it over to you.
I submit that San Carlos is part of the San Mateo County
Right.
Libraries, so they might not be getting their demographic information might be lumped
With the county.
with the
With the
county.
county, got it.
Same thing with Los Altos. I believe that they are Santa Clara County Libraries. So that's just to those two examples. The reason why you might not see particular cities might be because they're part of a county system instead.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but.
At least in the data that was presented here, because this is data that the California State Library collects from all of the library systems each year. And so those libraries you mentioned, again, they're part of that system, which is that county system. So if there's
But
an
we're not
interest,
part of the county system, we have.
no, the city of Menlo Park
City of
runs
Menlo
this.
Park system,
library.
even though we're part of
We're part of a consortium.
consortium, so when you can draw from, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite confusing,
Yeah.
bit of a unique
Yeah.
situation, but since now I'm talking, I do want to highlight that circulation per capita, which I think is a pretty good comparable
Yeah.
statistic, because it's the items circulated versus the population, so it kind of cuts across everyone. Menlo Park has the 5th highest in the state, and certainly the highest in San Mateo County, so just let the record reflect.
And,
It looked
and
like Carmel was the only one that was. Carmel had a really high one too, but
yeah,
Carmel's higher, I think Santa Clara, I think, county is a little bit higher than us, but,
it had a
That's a
different
different
name, it wasn't Carmel, it was Harrison or something.
yeah, interestingly, we saw an uptick in our circ per capita after the pandemic, and I think that has to do with the pretty
Mhm.
pretty comprehensive pruning, let's
Yes.
say, that we did to make room for senior services here.
Yeah.
So we really shrunk the size of our collection and really took hard looks at things and sort of started making the items that were left on the shelves really
Right.
earn their real estate in a way. But we also did a lot of refreshing and buying when we did that pruning. So like updating things that maybe we hadn't updated in a while, but we had a lot of time during the pandemic to look at the collection and evaluate it and update it.
And that's something that folks who aren't working in libraries don't necessarily know or recognize, which is that weeding is a natural part of the life cycle of the library, and the fastest way to get a better circ per capita is to weed the stuff that isn't circing, so that the things that do circ are more visible. And, sorry.
Oh, no, I
the
like
lingo.
Where do books go when they're weeded?
That's a great question. We have, we have a, relationship with our friends of the library, and we also use a service called Thrift Books. So, Thrift Books, takes and resells used library books. There are books that are in poor enough condition that the place where they go is the great beyond of books. But, but, you know, that's, we make an effort to make sure that our books get another life, through the friends, but through Thrift Books as well, especially.
Great.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Makes me think of all these different questions. So I guess 2-part question. One is there an informal, you pointed out like, we looked on the survey results and the comparable library is Burlingame, but have you explored like with the county library system, do they internally have some parsing mechanism by which you could get a closer look directly at San Carlos's circulation numbers? Or specifically at, one branch versus another, since you're, part of the consortium? And secondly, is there, I don't know if it's a discussion like with the sheriff's office and the, like, that there's some police departments are, it's like, out, farmed out to the county sheriff's office to manage that. Is there any like benefits or, one way or the other about the Menlo Park Library being independent versus being part of the county library system?
Great, I can field those. So to the first question, yes, we can get more branch level data from the county. I actually think the state library has it. It's just a different data set that we have to kind of dig into and tease out that information. So we can kind of bring that back to a future report to the commission, if not next month, in a couple of months. So we can get that. I think I'll really distill down the city versus county operated library into one thing is that it costs more to have the county run the library and you get less services.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not to mention less local control over what's offered.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, we can actually see, because we have insight into the back end of the integrated library system. We can run reports on basically everything in the collection for the whole county. So we could look at those numbers for San Carlos.
Sure.
And we often will sometimes take a look and see, like, we can run reports. What I like to look at is what are our customers borrowing that we don't own? So what are they borrowing through the reciprocal loaning of the county that we don't own, and then purchasing those? Because, you know, a lot of times people won't come up and say, hey, you don't have this, why don't you get it? They'll just get it from somewhere else because they find it in the catalog and they reserve it.
The other, one of the things that is a benefit of having the library run at the city level is, in terms of tailoring the collection, SMCL has all of their collection done by one central office for collection development. And they're absolutely looking at the circulation stats for each city, but, the librarians who are working at the city libraries with the patrons on the floor aren't doing the collection development. And our librarians are. So our librarians are intimately familiar with the community and what they want, because they're sitting out there and getting that feedback. And there's, not to say that feedback can't go to the central office of collection development, essentially. But that knowledge, that working knowledge of the collection, it's not just, it's getting the feedback from the community, but it's also working with materials, seeing what's circling, handling it, being in the space.
Yeah, seeing what's worn out
Yeah,
from
yeah, oh gosh.
people
I guess
using it,
because I
whether
get
it's-
another copy of such and such, it's just a step removed.
And my question was in no way suggesting that we should be part of the same.
No.
Yeah.
I was just
I,
curious.
but I made a note, it would be interesting, you know, we've sort of brought back more general data. We could bring back like a different flavor every month or every other month, where maybe we show you, okay, well, what does it look like? How are we doing compared to Palo Alto, Redwood City, Atherton, Woodside, like the ones that are physically closest to us? How are we doing compared to those? We
Yeah,
can bring
yeah.
that back.
I agree, and you know, I just want to bring up another point too, which is just sort of the makeup, the geographic makeup of our county is that we are like right on the southern edge of San Mateo County, and we actually have quite a bit more in common with Palo Alto, which is in Santa Clara County, than we do. Nothing against like South San Francisco, but it's just
Right.
so far away and so different. So when we do the comparables, I think it would behoove us to kind of look at, well, you know, like Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Palo Alto, which are in Santa Clara County, as well as like the Burlingame and San Carlos and some of the other communities in this county.
Slightly different comment, but I wanted to compliment you, Nick, on pulling together all of the stats for our own library and make a suggestion on it, which would be now that we're finally at the point where we're seeing January and February over last year, if we can add a year-over-year change in percentage, that would be like a very helpful way to be able to scan trends. And one of the trends that I certainly noticed is that looking at February, at least, circulation of physical books is flat, but online is way up. And, you know, I know we've commented in the past, Rose, on like, the difficulties of online and living in overdrive in terms of like just data and, you know, what they tell us, but, you know, I think to me, and this is my own usage as well, the trend line is very clear that online book usage and borrowing is like a trend and it's here to stay and it's just going to keep growing in terms of how people access libraries. And, you know, I'd just be super curious about, and there probably aren't good solutions because I haven't seen any, but any upstarts or like new solutions that are sort of seeing like, hey, here's this entrenched, lazy, pretty much like monopolistic
Yes.
online book providing system.
I second it.
Is there anything else we could do in terms of, you know, finding new providers that actually give us that same level of insight on circulation and user needs and pricing? Because, you know, it is a little bit, you know, my husband was just telling me he started reading books. He's very excited. And he was like, I went on to Libby and I wanted to read this book and it's an 8-week hold. And I looked at the Menlo Park Library and there's like 3 copies on the shelf. But it's this chore when you have a young child to take the child, put them in the car seat, drive to the library, go check it out. And, you know, there's just such a big preference between Hoopla and Libby. and
Yeah,
all
I was
that.
gonna
So
say, did he also try Cloud Library?
he tried Hoopla and he tried Libby.
Okay, we've got one more called Cloud Library, may or may not help,
Yeah.
but that's. Cloud Library is to ebooks what Link Plus is to our regular collection, so it's an interlibrary loan service. So that's one of the ways that we're looking into this, because you're right. Libby and Hoopla, they absolutely are they're the big dogs in the room, and honestly, at this point, it's sort of standard for a library to have Libby and to have Hoopla. There are other providers, those are the big ones, and they are the best ones in terms of having the materials. And they do a pretty good job of covering each other's bases. But there are some other resources like Cloud Library, so what it does is, we get access to other libraries, I believe in no, it's beyond California. There are other libraries who've joined Cloud Library and, we can have access to their materials as well, but only if their patrons aren't using them. So that's a little bit of, it's just like Link Plus, yeah.
Yeah.
So if the item is already checked out or on hold for a patron of their library, then we can't even see it, but
Yeah.
it's a third option.
Yeah.
I guess this is a way of saying, yeah, we do look at this stuff.
And I don't know what other options are available. It's more just commentary that trend is here and
Oh,
here to
sure,
stay. And
absolutely.
being where we are, located where we are, our adoption rate of technology and like ebooks is just going to be that much
Yes.
higher. So I'm sure you're always actively looking for more options from a strategic standpoint.
Well,
But it
what
just
what
feels
it
like
needs is
how awful that
regulation. There's just
15%
no,
you can't
there's
even
no
see what's happening.
regulation in terms of internet resources. And so I would really like to see a top-down change in terms of governmental regulation of how these vendors are able to
Yeah,
function.
the publishers they're kind of counting coup on us from the old days, right? So, you know, in the old days, you would publish a print book, the library would buy 1 copy and circulate it 50 times. And the publishers, I don't think really like that. So when it got to e-library, ebooks, where they can kind of lock down that
Yeah.
content a lot more than they can with a physical book, they started doing things like charging a lot for it or having the rights expire after a year and you have to buy it again.
Yeah.
Or you have
They
to
do
buy
that
it
all the
after 30 uses. So it's tough. The library industry as a whole is kind of looking at that, and bigger players, bigger public libraries and bigger public library systems are often the drivers behind that change, sort of open source ebooks, things like that.
Right.
But you know, the
The
consolidation.
Archive
Yeah.
lawsuit is a that's a pretty big blow for
Yeah.
open source
The,
content.
the consolidation in the publishing industry hurts libraries
Yeah.
too.
It really does. The publishers,
So-
we need the publishers because
It's
we
not
need
a
what they create, but they are our natural adversaries in the sense
Yeah.
that they benefit from what, they benefit, they do not benefit from what we can provide, which
Right,
is
right. They're
more
naturally in
access.
opposition to
Yeah.
freer
Yeah.
use cost of content.
Right,
Yeah.
they don't want to have it for free.
right.
But it would be also, your comment made me think that maybe what we could bring back in a future month is a comparison, like break down those resources stats a little more, so you can see even which ones were books, audiobooks, video. Even that sort of into those three, so you could see maybe where the trends are, because I think what's driving a lot of the trends are increased usage of downloadable audiobooks and
Mhm.
video.
Yeah.
We don't
Oh,
have a lot
interesting.
of, we don't have a lot of downloadable music. We actually have a really good collection that nobody uses called
Yeah.
Naxos, but we don't have a lot of use of that collection yet. Anyway, sorry.
And yet though, because I think Commissioner Chenrick, you pointed out a pretty interesting piece of data, which is that the circulation of physical items has remained steady. And that's totally expected. Menlo Park's population has stayed steady. So when we're seeing like an uptick in online and digital, the question, it's not necessarily cannibalizing the physical book, right? It's more, there are new readers, or maybe we're adding new titles in those online platforms as they grow. So that's a pretty interesting trend we're keeping our eye on. And actually, if you look back historically over the years, circulation of physical items has still kind of remained at that level, and we wouldn't expect them to necessarily grow exponentially unless there were more residents in town, which there aren't. So it's a pretty
Yeah.
interesting thing to watch. And one thing I will say, we really do control the physical books. We can use them quite a bit, where we have much less control about the price or accessibility of the electronic
Yeah,
ones.
and I think it's a shame, right? Just because
Yeah.
it's clear there's an access issue from people geographically, to get there. I mean, I do think you're right in terms of, circulation, obviously from the comparison set is super healthy, right, on a per capita basis. And I assume that's probably based off of physical circulation
Mhm.
when you're looking at those stats. But what I noticed was online is up, like that adoption is increasing. And then also, if you look at the growth of programs, it's actually increasing quite a bit as well, like those in-person programs, which is also like something very interesting, which is the face of how people want to interact with their libraries, and the services kind of change in terms of mix or blend over time.
Mhm.
So, yeah, electronic circulation now is like 100,000, and our total circulation is 600, 700,000.
Mhm.
So you're talking 15 to 20% of our total circulation is electronic circulation.
Mhm.
So it's healthy.
I'm sorry, I keep thinking of like new questions when
I should stop.
comments.
That's why we're.
So like, other independent city library systems that are nearby, there's Redwood City, which maybe has a similar demographic and similar challenges being, also not part of, or challenges and benefits of not being part of the county system. Has there been any ongoing conversation with the Redwood City Library?
We meet with the counterparts in the other libraries
On
pretty
committees
regularly.
with
Mhm.
the other Peninsula Library System people. I'm going to one tomorrow morning. If anyone has any questions. So we do have conversation back and forth. I don't know that we've had specific conversation about this. And yes, Redwood City is demographically similar, but don't forget that they are a city of 82,000.
Right.
We are a city of 32,000. So there is a difference there.
Yeah, I think there's 9 city operated libraries within the county. mostly because they were established way before the county system came along, and there never had been a value proposition to kind of stop doing that. Burlingame, Redwood City and so forth, but it sounds like there's more interest in that kind of comparative, like, the town by town, so I think we'll bring that back. But hopefully the state level data was a good entree to this type of data. We've got tons of it, so.
Yeah,
happy
if
to
you're a
bring more back.
spreadsheet nerd, you can dive into the state data. You can basically download all of it and then manipulate it however you want to.
Great. Shifting now to item F3, Library Commission tentative agenda calendar. Nick,
Bring it up on the screen. Okay, here we go. Thank you for sticking with us. It's a good discussion tonight.
When would be a good time for me to ask for participation?
When we get to the update section, I think, just in the next section. So, Rose wants to hit you guys up for participation in a couple of things. I do too as well. So this is March, looking ahead to April. We select, note that it's fourth Monday in April rather than third Monday. Remember when we did that calendar where we looked at where we were clashing with the planning commission? The third Monday in April was one where we were clashing, so it's going to be fourth Monday in April. Some more policy updates, hopefully bringing back the strategic plan, and selecting a commission chair and vice chair. So you'll get to rehash all of the hashing that we did about how we rotate chair and vice chair in. We do it by length of service. So you longer serving members who haven't been chair or vice chair, get ready, because here it comes. It's not a particularly, oh, well, I don't know. I should let Vice Chair Singh speak to whether it's a particularly onerous task or not being chair or vice chair. But that's what's coming up. And then looking further out, the joint meeting in May, which should be a happy occasion at the BHCC, fingers crossed. We will have something coming back about early childhood education, which is going to be a subject of a city council study session, talking about child development here in Menlo Park, the child development services here in Menlo Park, of interest to this commission because we partner with the child development, child care teams, and working with them in early literacy quite a bit. So that might be of interest to you guys as well. That will stop.
great. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We'll stop sharing so that everyone can see my lovely face. At this point, if anyone would like to make a public comment on item E3, which is the review of the Library Commission tentative agenda calendar, please use that raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, *9 if you're on the phone, and if you're here, fill out a comment card. Seeing no comment.
All right, commissioners, any comments or questions on the calendar? Seeing none, we will move to item G, commissioner reports, individual commissioner reports. Would any commissioner like to make a short report out on items of interest to the entire commission? I have one quick report, which is I attended the book sale last week and it was excellent. And I want to commend the library staff for organizing that along with, I think, the Friends of the Library. So thank you. Any other reports? No.
We have
Well, there are potentially a couple of
staff reports.
future reports that the commissioners may make, because I believe we have a couple of events coming up that we were looking for commissioner participation in potentially.
Yes, indeed. So, upcoming, we have got, the, Menlo Park Youth Poetry Voices celebration, which is, April is National Poetry Month. And we like to celebrate that here at Menlo Park Library by inviting youth poets, grades 1 through 12, to submit their poetry unto us to be celebrated. What I am looking for ideally is one of you, I don't need more than one, who would like to sit on the review committee of the poetry. So all of the poetry submissions that meet the submission guidelines will be incorporated into an anthology, which will go into our local authors collection and also will be given out to all of the entrants. There will be a celebration on May 21st, which will be, there will be a celebration at the library of just for all of any of the young poets who wish to read out their poetry. There'll be some food, celebrate the young poets. Anyone can read. It will be the same night as a city council meeting, and select young poets will read before city council, and that's what I need from the review committee. Our review committee this year is looking to be somewhat illustrious. We've got a couple of community college professors. We've got a couple of teens from our youth advisory committee. We've got a couple of library staff, and what I would love to do is fill it out with both a member of the library commission and also a member of the library foundation who are kindly helping to sponsor the event. So the ask is, if any of you particularly enjoys poetry, I would love to have you sit on that committee. And the committee.
Hang on,
oh,
not just any poetry. This is incredible expressions of poetry from Menlo Park youth, and I will tell you, you will laugh, you will cry, you will be blown away. These artists are the greatest you'll ever encounter because it's so pure and so incredible. And basically, you just get to read these amazing poems and then put them forward for some additional recognition.
Sean's favorite event.
But objectively, the poems are great.
So, yeah, so what it would look like in terms of a time commitment is during the first week of May, I need an availability sometime during the first week of May. All of us are gonna get together in a room. I'll get us some food, and we'll probably break into, I think there are enough of us that we can break into groups by age range probably, and take a look at the poems and select. And so, yes, there is an aspect of, yes, I wouldn't want to say judging, I would say appreciation.
Some poems
evaluation.
are gonna be read at the city council, and you can't read them all, so you have to pick a few to
We
highlight.
must select.
And just an idea of the numbers from years past. So last year we had a smaller sort of participation rate. We were in the 20s, I think, in total submissions. The year in 2019, last year, we brought it back again for the first time since the pandemic. Right before we closed down, we had Youth Poetry Voices, and I think we had like 70 submissions. But
I'd say this year, we're probably looking at somewhere between those numbers.
yeah, so 50, and if there are 4 age groups, so you're probably only going to be asked to read 10 to 15 poems. There you go.
You're not on the spot right now, but please get in touch with Nick or just get in touch with me and let me know. I'd love to be able to schedule the review meeting. So.
And my ask is more of a sort of ceremonial appearance. So we are on April 2nd going to have the city council make a couple of proclamations. One is for National Poetry Month, but another one is for National Library Week, which occurs in April. And so there will be a proclamation sort of touting the power and the glory of libraries and why they're important. And it would be really great if we had a representative of the Library Commission there to receive the proclamation. You don't have to do anything. You pose for a photo. They do a lot of reading of whereas. We write that stuff. Actually, I take it from the American Library Association and give it to the city council. And we're asking the Friends, the Library Foundation, and the Library Commission to offer up a tribute for that proclamation. It happens at the beginning of the city council meeting, so you don't have to sit through public comment or anything else or whatever issue of the day. It's kind of a feel-good, nice thing to do and a way to show your interest and support for libraries. So if anyone is interested in that, April 2nd, probably 5:30, 6 o'clock, and maybe like a 15-minute commitment here in the city council chambers. I talk a lot tonight. Sorry about that.
Me too.
So wait, on these two things, is there gonna be like an email afterwards or something and people can volunteer or they can raise their hand right now, just.
I would be pretty good poetry. If somebody else wants to, that's fine. You can-
No, I'll take you, thank you.
I'm out of town for the April 2nd, so I can't do that.
If anyone's interested, you get to see the sausage being made at a city council meeting.
I can do.
Oh, great. Great. Thank you very much. So we'll be in touch with you guys, respectively about
Thank you.
what's
you.
Fantastic. All right, so now, moving on to adjournment. The next meeting of the library commission will be
It says April 15th. That's wrong. It should be the 22nd. Sorry.
on April 22nd, in person here at the main library, and public participation in person and by Zoom. So it is now 8:35 PM. I would like to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Hit the hammer.
Yeah, Let's keep my fingers off the table.
Thank you, everyone.
Good conversation.